So mindset, I think, is like everything. Believing in yourself, believing in your project, knowing that you can do something and having laser sharp focus that this is what you are going to do and it is happening.
My name is Bethany Saltman, and I am an author and a best-selling book coach.
And I'm Fran Hauser. I'm an author, a keynote speaker, and a publishing strategist. These How I Did It conversations will inspire listeners to claim their own authority mindset and turn the story they can't stop telling into a book the world needs to read.
This is Bookbound, the podcast, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Bookbound. Today's guest is truly a force when it comes to making her author journey into all it could be. I'm excited to introduce you to Gabrielle Hartley, a divorce and meditation lawyer turned two-time author. Her latest book is called The Secret to Getting Along and Why It's Easier Than You Think. As Fran and I reflected on our conversation with Gabrielle, what really stuck out to us is how she just makes things happen. From manifesting an endorsement from Gwyneth Paltrow to starting her book journey with absolutely no connections. She has really made it happen all on her own, which I really love. So if you're in need of a pep talk, know that we believe in you, and Gabrielle is here to put some serious wind in your sails. Let's get into the conversation. We are so excited to have Gabrielle Hartley here with us, the author of The Secret to Getting Along and Why It's Easier Than You Think. I love that little note of encouragement there.
Hi, Gabrielle.
Hi.
So the first question that we like to begin with is, how did you know that what is now in our hands as a book was in fact a book? We know that you are a lawyer. You had already written a book that was really successful. So tell us about how you went from, getting an idea and seeing something in your mind and recognizing it as a book.
When you're talking about my second book, The Secret to Getting Along, the whole time I was writing my first book, Better Apart, it was like I wrote the sequel before I wrote the prequel. So the whole time I was writing the first book, which is really geared toward people getting divorced and how to navigate when your relationship has broken down, it was really clear to me that I needed to do something that was more broad-based and like, how do we problem solve? How do we at least, get to a place where we can become better apart? It was really during COVID when everybody was making sourdough bread. I was like, I'm going to write a book. I'm like, not really that interested in baking. It seems like a good time to write that book that I was thinking about back in 2018 when I was doing Better Apart. And then when I wrote Better Apart, having been a positive divorce practitioner for about 2 decades at that time, when Gwyneth Paltrow said that she had consciously uncoupled, I turned to my husband and I was like, I'm going to write the book that Gwyneth is going to endorse, and it's going to change the conversation of divorce. And my husband was kind of like, oh, go to sleep. You're not a writer. And I was like, those are fighting words. And so then, ultimately I did write the book, which HarperCollins bought, and Gwyneth Paltrow did endorse it on the cover. So it's really about like getting this really clear, laser sharp vision that really took the idea from being an idea into putting it on the page and figuring out how to make it into a tangible thing that can be shared.
I love that.
So with Better Apart, how did you go about finding an agent? Was that like your first step?
Well, my first step was realizing like, oh, you have to have an agent, or either you're never going to get a publisher or you're going to get paid terribly by the publisher. You need someone who really knows what they're doing. So first I bought this book by a woman named, I think, Ariel Eckstedt, who wrote a book like How to Write a Book. She actually first founded Little Mismatch, those socks. Anyway, she was a friend of a friend and I was connected to her, and she kind of told me like, oh, I don't know about this idea, yoga and divorce. I don't really see it. And I was like, whatever. Okay. But I bought her book, and her book had a lot of great ideas and I really enjoyed the book. And so what it told me is to figure out who writes other books like the one you're writing and figure out who their agents were. So first I did a whole lot of sleuthing that way. I was like reaching out to the people who wrote the books that I liked, and some of them wrote back to me and many of them ignored me. and agents ignored me, and it was like it was kind of fun, I'd been home raising a couple of kids and having a law practice, and it was like it's not like this was this dream that I'd always been afraid of doing, so for me, it was sort of like an adventure. It was sort of breaking out of my regular mold, and so, ultimately, I got ignored so much, and I got so many letters of rejection. I'm not one to give up. So then I went on Facebook, and I was like, "Okay, who is friends with whom? Like, who do I know who knows somebody?" On Facebook, I figured out that someone who'd published something which will remain nameless had a couple of friends in common with me. And so I reached out to her with my idea, and I sent her what I had made as a proposal when I didn't really know what I was doing. And she just kind of like didn't help me at all. So then there was a woman who I was a parent with who was in the book industry, who was a reader and a book buyer and seemed to like know everything about everything. And she was having like some questions or issues about her kid. And so I was kind of like just helping her like mom to mom. And then when I realized that she was such a avid reader and she was actually in the industry, I was kind of like, I've got this agent and would you look at this? And she looked at it and she was starting to like make notes on it. And then I was like, hey, I have an idea. How about you be my agent and I fire this other person because you're doing more work than she's doing and you sell it. You know all these people. Maybe a week or 2 or 3 later, she came back to me and she said, I've thought about it. I'm going to take this project and see if I can get myself a job with a really big agency. So then she connected me with somebody who was able to help me make my proposal more saleable. It was actually not super costly and it was, a pretty easy lift. And then, she got hired and then she sold the book. It was not easy. It was a long, arduous process, but I loved it every step of the way. It was really exciting and fun.
Okay, this is incredible, though. I've never heard a story like this one where she wasn't an agent. It's incredible. Like you ended up helping her launch her next chapter of her career.
But our work together was very seamless and she kind of guided me along. While I'm not a rule follower corporate person, I'm a very good student. I really wanted to publish for, a big agency and then it was just easier. I'd already written a book.
Same agent?
Well, actually, I went to another agent within her firm because she was handling like a different genre at that time. But this time I was able to just write the proposal myself. And then I had somebody just kind of help me shape it up. Again, it was like over a weekend they helped me. It wasn't a big deal.
Okay, I have a question. That first part, from the time when you said to your husband, I'm going to write a book and Gwyneth Paltrow is going to endorse it, how long did that take?
Well, I said that in 2015 and the book was on the shelves January 2019. For my first book, I didn't have any platform while what I was saying were things that hadn't been said before. I did really want to integrate yoga and divorce. And there's a woman that I went to college with who had a pretty good following, which I didn't even know, but she had a platform and she'd had a good divorce. So I invited her to work on it with me. I was able to use her platform to help me get a bigger deal the first time.
So the first book was published by a big five publisher, right?
And then the second book, I got an offer from actually St. Martin's, which is part of Macmillan. But I decided to go with Source Books because they both offered me substantially the same offer. And I figured, you know what? Maybe I'm going to get a little more attention. It was much more hands-on experience. And it was definitely the right thing to do.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, right? When you're deciding, first of all, it's such a wonderful position to be in where there's actually an auction for your book and there's more than one publisher. But really thinking through, like, as you're making your decision on who your publishing partner is going to be, thinking about the level of attention that goes to the book, right? Because there are marketing people at these publishing houses, but their time is limited. So it really depends on like how many books are they working on at once.
I mean, my experience both times is that you really have to do all your own marketing. That's just the reality of it. I assume they pick 1 or 2 books from the beginning, and those are the books that are going to be marketed. So with Better Apart, it was like a full-time job, and that book was in like People Magazine, the New York Times, the New York Post. I had a full spread. I was on so many things. And now this time, the secret to getting along, I had a lot more going on. I did not have the bandwidth to do the same kind of push that I did. But it's selling really well because, well, I think first of all, it's a topic that people are very interested in right now. And Source Books has a whole different media strategy that, is more algorithm based than talk show based. Basically, people will often ask me go to my website and they'll see, "Oh my gosh, you've been in all these things." That is literally all me.
I mean, you're obviously really scrappy, and we love that. For our listeners who are feeling like it's not appropriate to do it themselves because they don't feel like they have what it takes or they can't afford to hire someone to do it, where did you get that scrappiness? How did you come to get that confidence? And then what did you actually do to get a spread in People Magazine or the New York Times?
So mindset, I think, is like everything. Believing in yourself, believing in your project, knowing that you can do something and having laser sharp focus that this is what you are going to do and it is happening. I am also crazy. I have like loads of journals where I'm constantly writing down, I am doing this. I'm so excited. I'm going to sell. It's a mantra that I start to integrate into myself. How did I become so scrappy? I don't know. I changed houses every day between my two parents. I grew up in Brooklyn. My parents were artists. I think by nature, I'm a scrappy kind of gal. I'm a very resourceful person. And I've always viewed socializing and connecting like a sport. At the time, my kids were really into Hamilton. I'm like Alexander Hamilton nonstop. So I'd like go on LinkedIn and figure out who had friends in common with other friends in common, who worked here, who worked there. I was kind of shameless. I didn't do crazy things. I just asked people, and I didn't ask strangers. I asked actual people who I have actual relationships with, because as it turns out, you might be surprised to know that, like, your friends' friends will wanna help you, and if you're clever enough about it, even your friends' friends' friends might do something. Beyond that, good luck, but it's all about figuring out who you know, and I'm not in any of these circles. Like, I'm a divorce lawyer, right? I'm not in the publishing circle, I'm not in the superstar circle, I'm not a journalist. I always say, like, when I play one on TV, I do, like, a lot of TV and shows and radio, and I'm just a person who's, like, trying to change a conversation.
I love that. I work exclusively with women, and so many women feel like it's sleazy or you mentioned shameless. So I just love that you were just like going for it.
Somebody once said to me, "Act like an alpha male." Somebody more than once. When I was in law school, I was in a study group when I was the only female, and a guy who was a bit older, he said, "When you speak, often you end your sentence with a question. Don't do that." I couldn't stand him because he was constantly, like, trying to tell me how to talk like a guy, but I actually think that that was very helpful. Probably, Bethany, your work and my work is probably a bit aligned. Like, I love helping people, although it can be men too, feel powerful when they're in a place of precipice of great success, but they don't feel like they can do it just yet.
Absolutely. You could say that you didn't have much of a platform, but you had a lot of authority, inner and outer authority. You were a divorce lawyer, you knew what you were talking about, and you have this belief in yourself. So it gives you authority. Very inspiring.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'd love to go a little bit deeper into the marketing because you said, with these books, and I totally agree with you, there's so much responsibility that's shifted to the author to actually get to launch the book, to get the book out into the world. And obviously, you're very scrappy. You leaned into your relationships and you asked your friends for help. And I love that so much. That's always like the advice that I give to people is that your personal network is gold and really tapping into your relationships and seeing how people can be helpful to you. Besides that, were there any surprises for you from a marketing perspective? Was there anything that happened that really drove book sales that you were like, "Oh my gosh, wasn't expecting that one"?
I will say that when I hit a certain point, like, the New York Times did contact me on their own. The Drew Barrymore show contacted me on their own. Like, it did start to take on a bit of a life of its own, The Better Apart. The thing that was surprising was that people were really hungry for this kind of knowledge. I remember having conversations with the publishing house at Harper saying, it used to be you get on the Today Show and then your book is a overnight success, and it just does not work that way. My book has been out now 5 years and it sells very steadily every week.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you. Well, I have an uncle who wrote a book called A PhD is Not Enough in 1995, and he sells thousands of copies every year. So I feel like a little
That's amazing.
it was 175 pages, and I'm like, "That's not a book, that's a pamphlet," like, or 150 pages, but, the world has really changed. I don't know, the marketing piece, I feel like you just have to love it. Like, something that I did, I grew this thing called the Better Apart blog, which is, like, the number 1 most read blog in New York on divorce, which is for over 2 years, I invited guests to publish free of charge anything that they did around divorce, recovery, wellness, and it's amazing. I mean, I had to shut down having guest blogs because it was just that was taking on its own life, and that wasn't a direction that I was going in.
That's like such a lovely way for you when you were doing that. It was a lovely way for you to give back to people and to help amplify. They're there for you and they amplify your work, right? So it's like this like cycle.
And, again, 5 years ago, there was a little bit more traction, I think, on social. It's really with COVID, with everybody on it, it's just there's everybody on it. I will say something else that helped in terms of marketing, and maybe it's not directly for the book, but I did a TED Talk called The Secret to Getting Along and Why It's Easier Than You Think, and that got a fair number of views, and then from there, I got a speaker's agent. It's like somebody once said to me, "It takes 5 years to be an overnight success," so
What's your life like now? Are you still in full-time practice or are you more in the bookish world?
it's funny that you should say that because I just redid my LinkedIn banner, and it says, like, "Online mediator dot author dot keynote speaker." So, The Secret to Getting Along just came out and the soft cover is gonna drop. I'm not quite ready. Book number 3 isn't germinated yet, although I definitely intend to write another book. Of course, it's gonna be another relationship book because, like, the question I asked you when we first came on is, are you a writer or an author? I'm very much an author. I've got things to say that I think are important. Something I've learned is that people are very fear driven. I tend to not be fear driven. I tend to be like in Better Apart and in The Secret to Getting Along. Everything's framed really positively. And I might try something a little different for my next book just as an experiment. The delivery might be similar, but we'll have to wait and see.
I love it. So did you have a writing partner on both of your books? Did you have somebody help you write the book? Or did you write it all on your own?
No, I wrote it. Well, the first book, my
Amazing.
co-author and I really did write it together. My second book, other than my editors, I wrote it myself. I'm writing about what I talk about and what I do, right? And so it's just all about organizing it in a way that can be digested by the reader. What's interesting is, we're always editing. So I wrote The Secret to Getting Along and I did this TED Talk, and now I talk about the TED Talk and I realized so I have this whole thing called the YES method, but really it should be the EYS method because that's really how it works, but nobody would remember that. I'm often thinking about, "Oh, if I rewrote it, how else would I have shaped it?"
Well, you're developing your thought leadership.
What would the EYS method be?
So in order to unravel any argument that you're having, at the center, at the core is always the emotional story, the motivation, like, why are you arguing about the thing you're arguing about? Why are you digging your heels in so hard, right? We lose sight of that because we get stuck on the thing we want. We get stuck on the what. So that's the E, right? The emotional story. The why is what's your role? So I start with what's your role, and then you say you need to know your role because of this, but it's really the other way around. And then we unpack your role and all the destructive behavioral tendencies we have. And then the S is all about shelving or taking a pause long enough so that you can figure out what the heck you're doing to get in the way of figuring out what your core motivation is. Because once you unpack your core motivation, the emotional charge tends to de-escalate. And when you're de-escalated, the other person typically de-escalates and things have a way of working out.
It sounds a lot like the writing process.
I just love this conversation so much. Gabrielle, oh my goodness. Thank you so much. I had no idea. The whole agent story is just like blowing my mind. That's just incredible. I love how you've approached like the mindset that you've approached this publishing journey with and just how scrappy you've been. Like you're just such an inspiration. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
I was really looking forward to coming here and to meeting you guys.
So exciting. And let everyone know what's the best way to stay connected with you? Where can they follow you?
You can really find everything at GabrielleHartley.com. And I am on Instagram and I am on LinkedIn. But GabrielleHartley.com would show you how to work with me, or if you just wanted to contact me to discuss anything like that.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Bookbound.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe and rate and review us on your favorite podcast listening platform.
Please visit us at bookboundpodcast.com for more on us and how we work as authors.